We're back with the balance breakdown. Ian O'Neill, Harry Powell, and boy, oh boy, we have much to discuss. Cage Warriors 153, UFC Vegas 72. And we're going to get straight into it. We're going to talk Cage Warriors 153 first. A very, very memorable night inside the 3 Arena in Dublin, Ireland. Always a great show. And this one did not disappoint again, Harry. I guess with the Cage Warriors show, I think the lads covered it very well on the big podcast. But for me personally, it was just a reminder of what Cage Warriors are and what they're about. And I think we got to see it all on show on Saturday night, giving talent on the regional scene in Ireland and the UK and in other areas as well across Europe. And they've been doing it for quite some time. And it kind of got away from that way of thinking. You can get caught up into the pay structure and everything like that. What Cage Warriors are is nourishing young up and coming fighters and matching them well. And we've seen the product of that environment, I think, on Saturday night in the 3 Arena. It was a very, very good card overall, Harry. Before we get into the nitty gritty, your just overall thoughts, please.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think it's important that we, as media members, as fans of the sport, are always vying for these athletes, however young in their career, to be paid in such a fashion that allows them to not work a job outside of fighting, should they choose to. Obviously, if a fighter wants to work a job, we've got Joe McColgan, right, who has very openly spoken about continuing and wanting to continue to work his 9-to-5 job because, one, it pays well, and two, he enjoys it. And then you have Oban Elliot, who coming into fight week has said that he has to work a job, not because he wants to, but because he has to. And these are things that we should be forcing as much as possible promotions to adhere to. And that's that fighters are able to work their full-time job to be a fighter, to train full-time, to get the recovery they need, to be able to form a proper S&C program, to form a proper nutritional program, and allow them to be the best they can be. Now, Cage Warriors, like other promotions of that level, just don't have the funds to do that. At least en masse, they don't have the funds to do that. And whilst I understand that, and I think nights like what we saw on Saturday will elevate Cage Warriors stock and hopefully bring in more money from sponsors and this and that and the next thing so that they can reinvest into the fighters' contracts. I do think it's important to understand, as you've said, Cage Warriors as a promotion has a very, very, very clear goal and a clear outset. And Graham talked about that pretty well on the podcast with Sean, that fighters aren't here to make money. Fighters aren't here to be in a situation where they can look after their families and whatever forever after their Cage Warriors career. They are here to use Cage Warriors as a platform, as a stepping stone, as a jumping board a lot of the time. Obviously, you can have somebody like Jimmy Wallhead who circles his career all the way back round and comes to finish his career in Cage Warriors. You can have Rhys McKee using it to get back to the UFC or wherever he chooses to go after his second outing with Cage Warriors. And then you have people like a Tobias, a Harila, a Shelley, a Paddy McCorry, and any of these types of fighters, a James Sheehan and Oban Elliot, who are vying to build their onwards careers via Cage Warriors. And I think, as you've already said, what we saw on Saturday night was sort of the manifestation, not just of the produce of Ireland, but equally a showing of what Cage Warriors can provide a scene, a global scene, a European scene, and then obviously a very local scene in Ireland.
100%. And I mean, I thought Graham Boylan spoke very well before the event with Sean. If you've not seen that interview, definitely go out and check it with Sean Sheehan on Sherdog about that situation and what Cage Warriors are, and spoke very well after the event as well in the media scrum. And I mean, he's not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. He's not trying to tell any lies. I mean, he says what Cage Warriors are, and the product was well on show in the 3 Arena. Like I said, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the fights on the balance breakdown. We're going to talk fight tactics, analysis, and breakdowns of a lot of the fights on this card, and we'll talk a little bit about the UFC card a little later on. First on tap, Harry, Rhys McKee and Judo Jimmy Wallhead in the main event. A great fight, a a sad ending for Jimmy Wallhead, a pioneer of the game, and a leading man in UK mixed martial arts for many, many years. Went in there against Rhys McKee, he himself is on his own journey, and that's the journey back to the UFC. With Rhys, maybe I'll start. We'll get into it. We had been chatting during the fight about his performance and the way the fight was going. And it was quite clear early in the fight that, McKee was the more accurate, precise, confident fighter in there. He was dictating the pace of the fight. He was dictating the distance and keeping Jimmy at the end of his jab. I guess the only disagreement we had, where we ended up coming into agreement about this fight, is you thought Rhys had the capability of getting Jimmy out of there a little bit sooner than, the second. You're thinking maybe the early second round or third round. I was thinking maybe 3 or 4 myself. The reason why I was thinking that was accumulation of a lot of things. And I think Rhys McKee ticked off a lot of boxes. Like the question, is he ready to go back to the UFC? I think the answer to that question is yes, he is ready to go back. And we've seen over the course of the last couple of fights since he left the UFC and went back to Cage Warriors. One thing he always said about that last fight with Alex Morono in the UFC, he wasn't himself. It was a rushed performance. But what we've seen since he's left the UFC is a lot more calmness, a lot more patience, and a lot more preciseness. And all of those aspects were on show in the main event against Jimmy Wallhead. And it was a slow destruction, with all due respect to Jimmy. It was a slow destruction. I did agree with you. I felt Rhys probably could have gotten him out of there anytime after the second round, but he picked his shots well. Had to come over a little bit of adversity in round 3 when Jimmy came on strong, but came through that. And ultimately, the right decision was made at the end of round 4 to call the fight. Looking at that, Harry, how do you assess Rhys McKee's performance? And do you think it's time for the UFC for him again?
I think it's time for the next step. I don't know whether that's necessarily the UFC or not. And I'm not saying that even necessarily with anything to do with Rhys. I just think that in 2023, it's not the UFC or bust for fighters now. We've seen fighters like Brendan Loughnane go out, join the PFL, and take home a couple of $1 million. And would he have made that money in the UFC? I think the answer is no. Or at least it would have been far harder, and it would have taken far longer for him to go out and achieve that money in the UFC. Now,
I think Rhys does have only as eyes for the UFC. I think we did have asked him, so I think that's why I mentioned the UFC number 1, and I think that's what he wants as well. Now, you're very right what you're saying.
A fighter for having eyes for the UFC doesn't necessarily mean it's the right decision for him. You know what I mean? And what I was going to finish is, like, it really depends on what Rhys wants for his own career. You know, if he wants to be able at the end of his career to say, I went to the UFC, I competed with the best guys in the world, I won some, I lost some, and that was me, fantastic. If Rhys has an opinion or wants to go in, earn as much money as possible and get out, fine. Maybe the UFC isn't the best route. And I think that's a speaker's corner, right? For later down the line. But like, if the answer is he ready for the next step? Yes, absolutely, he is. And I think he showed that over the 4 rounds. I think you mentioned it absolutely perfectly. A slow destruction is what it was, right? He came out in the first round, and he said in the post-fight interview with Dan Hardy when he was consoling Jimmy Wallhead that this man struck fear into Rhys McKee. And fear in a fighter can do one of 2 things. It can either force them to put in the camp of their career, or it can force them to shell up and make some excuses and take some shortcuts. Rhys gave Jimmy Wallhead every bit of respect in that first round that Jimmy's illustrious career commanded. He just picked away at the jab. He took away the legs. And he went back to the jab. And something that Sean has spoken about as long as I've been following SevereMMA is that the jab wins fights. And it's exactly what we saw on show on Saturday, is Rhys just chipped away. And whilst I think there are some critiques or some things I'd love to see Rhys do better or more of as the fight wore on, you can't take away that every time Jimmy looked like he was wanting to step into distance, cut an angle, feint for a shot, there was a jab in his face. Whether it landed or didn't land, it was a multifaceted weapon that Rhys used absolutely brilliantly. And that was the tale of the fight. The tale of the fight to me was a jab, was a low kick, and was takedown defense. And for me, those things alone, from a technical perspective, are enough to make me ask to see something else, stiffer competition that he may not find in Cage Warriors. And from an intangible, from a characteristic perspective, the ability for Rhys to wear that event on his shoulders, to walk out the way he did, in the fashion, in the environment that he walked into, knowing that it was Jimmy's final fight, and to still to be able to go out. He walked into the cage, he embraced the crowd, he went over, he shook Jimmy's hand, he shook every member of Jimmy's corner team's hand, and then he went out and systematically destroyed the man. To have that level of confidence, to be able to put on that level of performance under that level of situational scrutiny and stress, that may be the most impressive thing in this entire fight to me.
Yeah, and I was very impressed too that calmness and that patience, it manifested over into the fight itself as well, where, you know, he did have Jimmy on skates a couple of times and on the back foot with his jab and the pressure as well. But there were a couple of times in that fight where he could have just pushed with maybe 3 or 4 punch combinations and went forward. But Jimmy was just doing enough, Harry, to keep the respect of Rhys McKee as well, where, you know, you don't want to get in or you want to kind of walk onto one of Jimmy's big overhands, because we've seen what that happens in previous fights with Jimmy, even at this stage of his career. Very, very powerful. I wasn't surprised about how Rhys handled the situation at all. What I've been impressed with listening to his interviews and having interviewed him himself is that calmness is there on the interviews to see, but it's also off camera when you're having a chat. And you're talking about a guy who made his professional debut in the same setting in the 3 Arena. And then, like you said, the stakes that are on the line here to go out there and do it. Look at, they're saying to get into the UFC, and Sean and Graham are talking about you need finishes. Well, Rhys has gotten out there now and got 3 finishes and 3 impressive performances. One of them being an absolute war as well, where he got the dog brought out in him too. So, I mean, you're ticking off the boxes of what the UFC want to see. I say UFC for Rhys because that's what he wants. I think that's where he deserves to be. And where he goes in the UFC will be up to him and how he performs and how he grows as a fighter as well. We have to remember he's a kind of a young veteran at 27 years of age and still has some time to progress and grow as well. But I'm definitely with you when you say that the next step needs to be a big step up in competition, whether that's with the UFC or whether he maybe defends. I think he's done enough at this stage to get there. I'd love to see him on the July card in London. I'll be interested to see if it happens as well. Very impressed with Rhys McKee. Know that you are as well. Just a little bit on Jimmy Wallhead. Number one, credit to Rhys McKee for sharing his moment in the spotlight, in dedicating the fight to Jimmy McKee, or to Jimmy Wallhead. Jimmy McKee, what am I like? You know, I thought it was very, very classy of Rhys to kind of give Jimmy a little bit of spotlight, because he is a true pioneer of the sport. He's been fighting for the longest time on the UK scene and representing the UK scene at a very high level across multiple different organizations. But Jimmy will go down as a legend of mixed martial arts, won't he, Harry?
For sure. And like, I think we speak about the likes of Jim Miller or Joe Lozon or Diego Sanchez or these kinds of fighters. But I think when you look at a more local level, you find guys who are built in the same fashion. And one of those is Jimmy Wallhead. Like, you'll hear Dan Hardy shed light on the history of how him and Paul Daly and Jimmy Wallhead would get together and they'd put these camps together and kind of just figure this stuff out on the fly. You now look at where Jimmy is situated at, in a beautiful facility in the middle of England, near the north of England, in Hardy Wallhead, producing amateur fighters. One of those amateur fighters was in his corner, which was lovely to see. The grappling coach at Hardy Wallhead was in his corner alongside Paul Ivans, the head coach of London Shoot Fighters. And you watch him compete. There was no quit. in that fight. He sat down on the fourth and he said to Paul, I'm not sure what to do now. Not take me out of here, but can you give me some direction on what we do now? And then there's a discussion and a bit of back and forth, and they make the right decision, and that's that we're not earning anything here. We're not proving anything here in these final 5 minutes, because what was already proved in the 20 minutes previous was that at any moment, Jimmy can land a big overhand. He can change things. He managed to get Rhys down at once, think maybe twice, but once with the threat at the back. He was dangerous at any moment. He can take a shot. The grit's there, the heart's there, the determination is there, and the unrelenting will to continue and to win was there for Jimmy Wallhead. And I find that in the modern era of MMA, that just raw inability to lose, even in the face of a challenge so monumental as he was facing in that fourth, he was still moving. He was still moving his head. The calm in his brain was still completely available, and he was still looking to find ways to separate Rhys McKee from his consciousness. And I just don't think we see fighters like that anymore.
No, rare breed, and definitely old school. But shout out to Jimmy Wallhead, and we wish him the best for what's next. An absolute legend. Tobias Harila and Ryan Shelley went at it in a co-main event, Harry, and it was a great fight. Unfortunately, Ryan Shelley fell on the end of a punch that caused some damage to the nose of Ryan Shelley. I think it was an injury that he was carrying into the fight. But let's talk about the fight before that happened. And me going into this fight, I had wonders on how Ryan Shelley was going to approach this fight tactically. Was he going to fight on the back foot? Was he going to fight fire with fire? Was he going to surprise everybody and try and dominate in the grappling exchanges? And I think what we did see, Harry, is a little bit of all of those things throughout this fight before it ended. Tobias, really credit to him as well, stayed moving forward. What the fight, in my opinion, was not going his way. I'm not sure how you were seeing the fight going, but I had Shelley winning 2-0 going into the third round. He was up on my card, but Harila was moving forward. He's sticking to his guns. He wanted to land the big shots. That big left hook was there. He was trying to counter Shelley time and time again. I mean, impressive by Harila, impressive by Shelley, even in defeat. What are your thoughts on the fight as a whole?
Going into this, the biggest question I had is how the Taekwondo style translates over as the competition begins to grow. And I think the first minute of both the first and the second round, we see the negatives. The first minute of both rounds were very strong for Tobias Harila. The second round was way stronger than the first. But in the first minute of the first round, Harila is chopping at the legs. He's catching Shelley as he stands wide. And that first minute, I think, is something that Team KF will take away and try to adapt. Because as then Shelley starts to make his adjustments and bring his stance just a touch closer and starts to use the movement a little bit better, he finds his range. He cracks Harila early with a 1-2 that opens up the first cut of the fight. The dominating in the grappling, I think the first round, I think there's an argument to score it for Tobias Harila. Now, people can tell me I'm wrong. The reason why I score it for Tobias Harila is because whilst Shelley did a great job of maintaining back control, he didn't look at any chokes in the first round, and there wasn't a ton of damage landed from the top because he was preoccupied by ensuring that the high ball ride was kept, and he was obviously looking for moments of when he could lace that second hook in. Wasn't able to do so for significant periods of time. However, he did have half back control, I guess you say, because there was a high ball ride, not both hooks or a body triangle, and kept Harila away from landing damage. Now, there was moments in the end of that first round where Harila managed to get out of that position, get to a clinch, land a nice knee. I don't think as we've talked about, there wasn't domination of position because he didn't have both hooks and he wasn't threatening chokes or whatever. It was just a change of positions. But I think the first round was close. The second round then was far less close. There was a moment, a period in that first minute where Tobias Harila caught Shelley with some really, really clean shots, and then sort of became his own nemesis. Threw a right hand from his hips, didn't allow his feet to travel with him, almost fell through the cage as, you know, he threw it that hard. And Shelley just turned the corner, took him down, dumped him in exactly the same beautiful fashion from a body lock, and just took his back immediately and was threatening chokes, was landing beautiful, beautiful cutting, damaging elbows from the body triangle hangover. And one thing that impressed me with Shelley's grappling was his use of underhooking the leg, which obviously if Harila decides to fall, there's a potential for a silhouette stretch there. Or he would oscillate between taking his right hand and posting it on Tobias Harila's right hand. And what that does is, if Shelley then starts to lace chokes and manages to get one under the chin, Harila has the wrong hand to defend the choke. He can't use the near hand, which is obviously the hand that can get further purchase on the choke. Instead, he has to use the short hand, which is a far, far greater disadvantage. That's really smart grappling. Really, really smart grappling. Not only does it keep Shelley up in the position and it keeps him connected, it keeps Tobias anchored to that 4-point position, having to carry all the weight of Shelley, but it also means that there's a free hand available to land shots, fight for chokes, etc., etc. Harila wasn't able to get out of that body triangle unless, I think there was like 8 seconds left in the round before he got out, landed a couple of shots. But then in the third, he comes out, does exactly what you've said, walks down Shelley, lands the powerful shots, hits him with a bludgeoning right hand that causes Shelley to turn away, cover up, eat a knee, and then we're done. Like, I understand there was an injury going in, and obviously that's going to be a substantial issue when you're fighting somebody like Tobias Harila. But I still come out of it with massive question marks over the style, over that Taekwondo style. I just think
I think it's unfair to just label it a Taekwondo style. Like, I mean, with Ryan Shelley, he has a few submissions under his belt already. We'd seen that. I think, whilst I agree with you on the damage side of things in round one, I think if he had have landed more shots off the back there, it would have been more convincing. But I mean, I thought he looked good. I thought he looked good in different areas. He looked good on the back foot when he decided to move forward. I thought his leg kicks were pretty good in that fight as well. I mean, I thought it was a pretty good performance by Ryan Shelley at this stage of his career as well, where he is developing, you know, your Taekwondo kind of style would have him fight at distance and range all the time with a pretty kick heavy one, but I don't think we see that all that much. Like, I mean, if you were to look at him, I think knowing that he has a Taekwondo background, I think if you didn't know any backstory, I don't think that particular style really showcases itself more so than anything else. I think he's developing into quite a well-rounded mixed martial artist now at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not disagreeing that he's turning into a well-rounded fighter, but I definitely can't accept that you can't tell that there's a Taekwondo base. Like, if you just watched where his feet are planted, like the way that, and you say like he's fighting from long range, well, that's exactly what was happening. Like, I'm not saying he wasn't landing
not all the time.
Well, it wasn't all the time because Harila was walking him down and closing the distance off. Like, maybe it's a better description to say a point fighting style, because in the same way as Michael Venom Page will close in with devastating 1-2s, that's exactly what Shelley was doing. Shelley was landing those step in side kicks to the body, the teeps to the body to keep him away. But the stance, the cadence of the rhythm of the stance, it's exactly that style. And I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying that in the same vein that I said for the 5 minutes before, it needs adaptation, and he is doing that. You're right to say he's 6-1 in his career. He's still a baby in this sport. And coming from that style there are merits to it. We saw it, right? Outside of those first minutes of those first couples of rounds, he was forcing Tobias Harila to have all sorts of fits and problems. But that doesn't mean that those first 2 minutes didn't exist, and it doesn't mean that against better fighters that those first 2 minutes won't be exposed further on in the fight. Now, I agree with you that there's room to grow. There's vast room to grow. And when you have a fighter who comes from a background with no grappling and he can put performances on just like that tells me something about his ability to learn and his ability to develop as a fighter. And so I agree again on the first round. If he'd have landed a little bit more damage or searched for a couple more chokes in that first round, it would have been closer. I think the first round is close. I think you can score it.
I agree 100%. Very close. I scored it to Shelley because I think he did enough. Yeah, he did just enough. I think when I was saying about the first round, and I think Shelley has had this problem before with the Matthew Elliot fight where he accepted bottom position and wasn't landing as much strikes. I think the importance of landing damage in those positions is going to have more of a clearer round for Ryan Shelley, I guess is what I was trying to say.
For sure. And I think if he goes back and watches it, he'll be kicking himself because those situations, those positions you saw in the second round. And now, obviously, I don't listen to comms, so I don't know whether Chris or Tom or Carl had said to him in between rounds, look, when you get those positions, land some damage, like open him up. Let's soften him up a bit here. Let's see if we can find that neck. Because in the second round, he had similar positions, but bludgeoned Tobias Harila from those positions. And so in the
100%.
first, like you say, land damage first, right? Search for the finishes first. I don't think this performance takes anything away from what we look at in terms of his trajectory, in terms of his prospect. Tobias Harila is a really, really difficult man to try to game plan for, a really difficult man to try to fight, a really difficult man to try to finish. And Shelley goes away with, as we've both said, some really, really, really fantastic moments in this fight that he can capitalize on, and some things that he can go away and improve on. And if there's anything to take away from an MMA fight at this stage in your career, it's those things that you want.
100%. And 100% well said. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Ryan coming back. And Tobias, I mean, he's right up there in title contention right now, really, Harry, after that performance. I mean, credit to him. He wanted to walk Ryan Shelley down. He continued to do so, and he got the finish. So, I mean, yeah, it's similar enough. He had his successes in the fight, and he ended up the winner on the day. I'd love to see that fight again down the line. Whenever it may happen, or if it happens, we wait and see. I think that would be a good one. We'll talk about Shari a little bit later on. I'll move on to Oban Elliot versus James Sheehan. A fight that I was really looking forward to. And like we talked about excitement factors in fights before, where you can just have absolute, like, no technique and just mad swinging. And that can be entertaining, or else you can have two high-level guys going in there and having a chess match, which I enjoy watching from time to time as well. And that's what we had here. It was a real technical battle. And Oban Elliot was just the better in almost all of the fight, really. James did have some success in the early rounds, but I think as the fight wore on, Oban's pressure, his left hook as well was pretty good. He just kind of kept James Sheehan kind of asking questions and kept on offering different answers throughout the fight. But a really impressive performance by Oban Elliot, showing his true class. And it's got to be the title next for him. He's got to get that shot. We'll see what happens with Rhys McKee, whether he moves on, whether that's a vacant title. But I was really impressed. And yeah, it was an exciting overall fight for me. I was on the edge of my seat. Well, not too much happening, but it was just an intriguing battle between two very technical guys.
I mean, I think loads happened. I just think both of those fellas know how to fight, you know, like, and that's a strange thing to say on a card full of professional fighters. But like what I mean by that, let me try and clarify that in a way that doesn't make me sound like a fucking idiot. What I mean by that is both guys know how to take a shot. They know how to see a shot coming. They know how to ride with shots. And so landing an impactful strike that the other fighter doesn't see coming, that causes that sort of visceral reaction that we're used to, is very, very difficult. And to me, Oban Elliot in this fight realized that James Sheehan has a very crisp, fundamental striking base. He's going to come forward. He's going to move his feet well. His head's not often going to be on the center line. He's got a really nice jab, a really nice teep, a really nice backhand when he fires it and finds his range. And so Oban allowed, baited, moved, created angles on the back foot for most of these 3 rounds, forced James Sheehan to come in, and then forced James Sheehan to feel his power. And that then left a conundrum for James Sheehan. Is James was fighting the way he wanted to fight, on the front foot, throwing his jab, dictating the range, dictating the pace. And yet Oban was so elusive and was so able to find the left hook counter. I thought the kicks from Oban Elliot were really nice in this fight, really added some variety to his game. But James, by the end of the third, was just questioning, what do I offer differently here? I can't take him down. He's really strong in the clinch. He's reversing me in positions that I'm usually dominant in. I can't seem to get a good rhythm of landing consistent damage with consistent combinations. He's not biting on the feints as much as, other guys have bit on the feints. I'm biting on feints from him. I know the left hand is coming and I can't seem to stop it. And you've got Oban Elliot there just waiting, patient, measured, finding his range. Now, there was a number of times where I think if Oban Elliot looks back again, he'll find that maybe he was a little less elusive in positions than he would have wanted to. He found himself skirting the cage wall maybe a touch more than he wanted to, and had to use his athleticism, had to use his explosivity to find his way out back into the center of the cage, or at least in an area of the outside of the cage that he was comfortable with. But all night, he found his right hand, he found his left hook, he worked the body well when he had an opportunity to. He kept himself defensively aware and defensively sound really, really well. And I agree 100%. The title has to be next. Absolutely has to be next.
He did kind of coast to that unanimous decision on the scorecards. Don't disagree with that at all. It was kind of, to me, it was those impactful strikes when they did. His strikes looked a lot more impactful than what James Sheehan's did. And I feel with Oban, we've seen him attack more, and I think he could have attacked more. But what happened in that fight is he found things that were working for him, and he just stuck with it because he did not have anything coming back from James. Like, James was not having any of the answers to any of the questions that he was providing as well. And I mean, I don't argue with that at all. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't take any chances. I think him not taking chances in this fight was out of the respect of the level that James Sheehan has. James Sheehan is 6-3. He's a much better 6-3 fighter. That you will see. He's probably the best 6-3 fighter that you might see out there at the minute. But he's going to take lots of lessons from that as well. I thought it was a very, very mature and composed performance from Oban Elliot, the type of performance that does reward you with a title shot. And I'm excited to see him get that opportunity. A great, great performance. Really excited to see James Sheehan back in there. He'll learn lots of lessons. I'm sure he'll have eyes on that November card, and he'll be back to the drawing board again, and he'll come back. And no doubt James Sheehan is going to find himself in these kind of fights again. He's right up there in the mix at 170. And I'm excited to see what goes down with him as well. Let's talk a little bit about Paddy McCorry. We'll finish off on the Cage Warriors card with Charrier and a run through the rest of the card. Whew, my goodness, Paddy McCorry. I was excited, and we talked about it a little bit, Harry, on the preview show last week about our excitement level coming into this fight based off what we've seen with Paddy McCorry in the James Webb fight. And Paddy McCorry came out there and just basically started where he left off in the third round of the James Webb fight, fought on the front foot, picked his shots off well, and it was just a tremendous performance. I think the knee and the finish itself was sensational. I think Sean described it absolutely perfectly on the big shot, or on the big show. It was a placed knee, not one thrown into the space. You can throw that knee up, trying to time a takedown, but McCorry threw it in that. I think he threw it earlier in the round, and it almost landed, and he timed the second one to perfection. It was absolutely beautiful. And that's why we're bringing it up here. This finish was worth a mention. The fight and the performance itself from Paddy McCorry, ultimately worth a mention here too. And he's one to look out for in the middleweight division, Harry, isn't he?
I think that's actually what I want to talk about. Like the flying knee is easy enough to talk about, right? We can discuss how well it was placed and everything else. To me, it's everything apart from that. It's the confidence of a man that comes in, coming off an amateur record of, some wins, some losses, went out, fought the guys he fought, did fine, comes in and 2 fights in, takes on an ex-Cage Warriors champion and goes 3 rounds with him. Okay, the grappling didn't go the way that he wanted. He got dominated in positionally in most of those exchanges, but kept himself sound, didn't get too deep in the weeds in any positions, and then finishes the third round as strong as you'd like to see a fighter of that time, of that caliber, fighting such a different level that he is used to. It was incredible. And he comes out here, he's taken a step back in competition, as he should, for what was a 2-1 fighter at the time, and absolutely decimates this fella. There was absolutely nothing close about it. The movement, how elusive he is on the feet, how fluid and languid his movement is, how, as a middleweight as well, I mean, we talk about middleweight all the time, right? And I have to throw it in here. I'm looking at Paddy McCorry right now as a middleweight, and I'm saying, give this fella another 5 fights, and then let's see him in the UFC. Let's see him. Because a man who finds shots and even attempts shots of that nature at that weight class is rare anyway. So to have the balls to find it, to have the audacity to throw it, and to have the accuracy to land it in the way he did is so impressive to me. And I'm so excited to see this fella back in there. There are some stiff tests at middleweight in Cage Warriors for a man like Paddy McCorry. And I'd like to see him built slowly. I'd like to see him built correctly. Because if he is, there's a serious prospect on our hands.
I'd be absolutely shocked if we don't see him fighting. I will say right now at this stage, because you know me, I get excited. I don't want to get too excited. We're going to see Paddy McCorry fighting for a middleweight title in Cage Warriors. Without any doubt for me, based off what I've seen so far, the experience that he would have learned from that James Webb fight, and then to come in here with the confidence and throwing those shots as well. Yes, it was a step down, but he did what you're supposed to do with that level of opponent. He went in there and, like you said, he won rather easily, and he will get a step up and he will be tested. And I'm excited to see his progression. I would be very surprised if we don't see him. I'm going to make a call. He fights for a title in 2024 in Cage Warriors. That's what I reckon. If he keeps on that activity, we say we get him in July on one of the cards, we get him in November, and we get him on a couple of early cards. I could see him very well fighting for Cage Warriors middleweight title at the end of 2024. And I'm excited to see his progression. It's really great to see. And it was a fantastic finish, a fantastic performance as well. We'll round off the main card talking a little bit about Morgan Charrier, who went in there and picked up a doctor stoppage TKO KO. Not too much that you can take from this fight. It was really last minute. He found himself in a little bit of a sticky situation, maybe trying to rush a finish in the first round, but he put a beat down on Pedro Sousa, and ultimately it was the right call by the doctor at the end of the first round to call a stop to the action. Look at it, he kind of went in under the radar. He kind of fought under the radar, and as Sean said on the podcast, he left under the radar. He has another win on his record. He takes another step towards maybe fighting for that featherweight title, whatever may happen. I think that division is a little bit in limbo until Paul Hughes' situation is kind of feathered out, whether he stays, whether he goes, whether he moves up and fights for the lightweight title. I don't know. Maybe we could be looking at an interim title being created, but the performance itself, Harry, like Paddy McCorry, this is what you're supposed to be doing with that kind of level of competition. Sousa went in there 18-4 before the fight, was experienced, but really had nothing to offer for Morgan Charrier.
Yeah, I mean, I would have no problem if Morgan Charrier, Jordan Vucenic, and Paul Hughes all were signed to the UFC, frankly. Like
100%.
Those three fellas, I don't need to see any of them fight each other again. I really don't. Like, if Paul Hughes is, as he teased on the broadcast, going to go up and fight George Hardwick for his belt, fine. But win or lose, move on. Win or lose. I don't need to see Paul Hughes fighting in Cage Warriors gloves for any other reason than a George Hardwick double champ attempt, whatever, that's fine. If you want to do Jordan Vucenic versus X fighter coming up at 145, fine, whatever. But again, if you want to do Morgan Charrier and Jordan Vucenic goes off to the UFC or whatever he does, is fine. It's an amazing problem for Cage Warriors to have those three guys battling it out. The problem is we've kind of done the battles now. You know, they've all fought each other the results have been what they may, and it's not really in Cage Warriors' interests to run those fights again. They've kind of taken the salt from the jar, if you will, and you've rubbed it into your steak and you've cooked it up, and now you're eating it, and it is what it is. So, look, Charrier went in and just dominated this fella from pillar to post, and as you say, he did what he had to do. I think it's important to mention him because of his sort of gravity in this division. But this was nothing to write home about, other than that it was decimating a fella that, to be fair, took the fight on short notice. Fair play to him. Went in, got decimated, and let's see what's next for Charrier. Let's see how this 145 division shakes itself out.
Yeah, very, very interesting to see what happens there. We'll take a quick run through the rest of the card. Adam Darby picked up a fantastic owl triangle choke against Jack Turner in the first round. Any thoughts on that itself? I think, Jack Turner, it was an error, I think, to kind of jump into the guard. And I think that Adam Darby really, really just took up that opportunity. Look, he's got he's a tall fella, got long legs, long arms, and he's got the body kind of structure perfectly to wrap up triangles, and he's always dangerous off his back. Obviously getting in plenty of grappling there at Team Rhino, lots of decent grappling guys there, and Redzer and everything, so he would have been doing a lot of work off his back. Very good and opportunistic submission with the triangle choke, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, look, I think, and this is no disrespect to either guys, but they're fresh in their career. Mistakes are going to be made. These things happen in MMA. Darby is a man that worries me on the feet. Seems to get clipped a little bit. We saw that in the fight previous to on Saturday, but seems when he gets on the ground, he has a wicked guard. Like, he wrapped up Jack Turner quick. And it wasn't even Jack Turner accepted the guard and was happy to play there. But you still have to finish triangles. You still have to wrap them up. You still have to adjust. You still have to do all of the things. And Adam Darby did it perfectly. And I think that sends a signal, at least, to the guys in Cage Warriors that you don't want to play when you're down there with Adam Darby.
Absolutely, absolutely. Leon Hill picked up a good ground and pound win in round 2 against Marcin Zambala. Looked very good. Look at Leon, had some issues. Obviously, talked to Andy about concussions. Took his first Cage Warriors fight on just a week's notice. That didn't go his way. Went on to the regional scene, picked up a couple of wins. Step up in competition against Marcin Zambala. Looked great. Looked huge for the weight. He is a big, big fella for 155. My God. And he did what he was supposed to do. I was confident that Leon Hill was going to win. Look at Marcin Zambala, 7-7. Was on a good run in his career. Was looking quite well, but just not quite there to the level of where Leon Hill is. Be interesting to see. I'd like to see Marcin maybe get another chance there. Leon, we need another step up for him again. It was an excellent performance. Any quick thoughts? You good? You happy enough with that performance?
Oh, great performance. He did exactly what he needed to do. And in the same vein as Oban Elliot, just don't take risks. Just go out there and win the fight. Take what's in front of you. You don't need to do anything crazy. At that level of composure, this early in a man's career, that's exciting.
Very good, very good. And Solomon Simon was the same as well, Harry. Went out there. Dorian Kolechnikov was defeated by TKO and punches in round 2 as well. Another solid performance. I know Solomon he said he fought safe in his first professional fight, and that's understandable. He fought against Ivanovic, I think. And no, it was a solid performance. He never looked in any trouble. He wanted to come in here and get the finish. He did just that. It was a good performance. I'm really impressed with Solomon as well, and looking forward to seeing his progression. Adam Shelley got the win. It was in spectacular fashion. A highlight reel KO, the spinning back kick, followed by the punches. It was the right call. Look at a great finish. I was happy for Adam Shelley here that he got a fight. I think that was important after putting in the work in the camp. Look at the level of competition is going to be better down the line. But like we said, he went out there and did what he had to do. And I think the finish was spectacular in its own right. And I mean, it's going to get some viral views and some clicks. And that's what it's all about, really, Harry. Nicholas LeBond picked up a bulldog choke over Ryan Curtis. That would be very disappointing for Ryan Curtis. Obviously, he was looking to bounce back. I hope he does get another chance, like Sean and Graham did say. Very, very good submission from LeBond. Not that often you get to see a bulldog choke. And I think, yeah, he did very well to kind of secure that. Love to talk to you because we were talking about Alexander O'Sullivan's armbar submission, because me and you were on the buzzer on WhatsApp when this was happening, and we were both like, oh my God, that was brilliant. Because you can look at the clip of the armbar itself and it's impressive and it's nasty, but Alexander O'Sullivan, Harry, was setting up that armbar from the minute his back touched off the mat. And it was beautiful. I'd love for you to break it down. Just your thoughts on the armbar itself and the setup of the armbar and what Alexander did.
Absolutely. So obviously we've said and will continue to say, for the most part, playing guard in MMA is not the most advantageous situation. Obviously, you're more able to land shots. You're more able to get hit. It's less able for you to land shots. There's more defensive work for you to do. However, Alexander O'Sullivan showed a level of calm and a level of composure and a level of calculation that's rare. Now, obviously, he's a man that's had a storied amateur career. However, coming in here in your second professional fight on a card like this, on a stage like this, having given some of the interviews and some of the insights into his personal life and his personal mindset before this fight, to go out and perform like he did was just fantastic. He gets taken down, is aware straight away, very early, that he's going to get taken down. And so instead of riding, fighting, trying to frustratingly flip-flap his way into some form of position, he accepts the takedown. He secures himself into a close guard position and immediately looks for overhooks. Why does he look for overhooks? Well, he looks for overhooks because it diminishes the offense of his opponent. He can't land shots if his arms are wrapped up, right? As soon as O'Sullivan can, he starts cutting angles. He starts looking for underhooks of legs. He starts looking for head control. He starts looking for moments where he can force his opponent to start to posture or start to land shots with the free arm. The moment that he allows his partner, who he feels is starting to explode but isn't addressing the overhooks correctly, Alexander allows his partner to posture, waits for the shot to come, cuts his angle, immediately has an elbow grip of the armbar, swings his legs over, and that arm is hyperextended before his opponent's back even hits the mat. It's just the level of, like I say, the level of calculation to know and to bait your opponent into a situation like that, which essentially is the natural thing to do. When you're in an opponent's close guard in open space, you want to hit them, right? That's what you want to do. You want to posture up. If you're in day one MMA and you've got an opponent playing bottom close guard, your coach will tell you, get your hands on their ribs or your hands on their waistline, posture yourself up and land shots. You want to oscillate between body shots and head shots to mix it up, work yourself out of overhooks, work yourself out of underhooks and land shots. And so his opponent was doing absolutely the right thing. However, he just didn't see the traps that were being laid against him, and Alexander O'Sullivan punished him devastatingly well.
And that was a result of 30 plus amateur fights. You know, we've talked about how important it is to develop your skill set as an amateur. And I think Alexander went with that and went with that on steroids, really, with 30 plus amateur fights. It's really unheard of. He set the bar there, but the results were there, Harry, to be seen on Saturday night. I mean, that's his second professional fight, 2 armbar finishes. He knows how good he is himself, and he's got a very, very bright future. I'm very excited to see him progress. That was at 130 or 140 pounds catch weight. I think he'll probably move down to 135 pounds eventually. And I think he can be a major player in that division in Cage Warriors too. Very excited to see Alexander O'Sullivan, who's doing some great work with CMAC, it has to be said as well. Him, Keith, Jordan, all the lads were there with him. A very young gym, but a very together gym, and guys who are willing to work with each other and build each other and help each other grow. And that's a very important thing. Alexander O'Sullivan is helping develop his own career and developing the career of everybody else at CMAC. And I think he's doing a phenomenal job at balancing everything out and going out there and performing at that level too. It's not easy to do. and it can't be snuffed at. Last but not least, Kyle McClurkin kicked off the card with a wonderful unanimous decision win over Owen Williams. McClurkin, he didn't look in trouble for 1 minute of this fight. It was a great, great fight and a great finish. And we shall move on to the UFC. That wraps us up for Cage Warriors. In the UFC, Harry, we had the main event. It was Song Yadong and Ricky Simón. And we asked a bunch of questions on what we were expecting in this fight. And what we were expecting in this fight was a victory for Song Yadong. And I think that, look, at the way I'll kind of describe how I was feeling in this fight is that what we found out with Song Yadong and the Corey Sandhagen fight and his fight previous to this was he wasn't quite ready for elite level opponent. And he must have gained a lot of lessons from that. And he came in, he took a step down. And what he proved to us in this fight is that he is more than ready and he needs to be fighting better competition than Ricky Simón. And we're talking about a guy who's probably going to be a mainstay in the top 5 of this division, in the 135-pound division in the UFC for quite some time. It was a really, really good performance. Patient, landed heavy shots, looked in control throughout the fight. Ricky Simón, asked some good questions there, but Song Yadong had the answer to everything. And in the end, Ricky Simón just ran out of answers, really, Harry. It was a really great performance by Song Yadong. Were you impressed?
I think I was equally impressed with Song Yadong's performance as I was sort of deflated a little by Ricky Simón, because Simón showed so many flashes of what could be in that fight. And I think he laid and does lay the blueprint on how to beat somebody like Song Yadong. But whether it's just he just didn't have the ability or doesn't have the ability to execute the rest of the game plan, whether it's that Song Yadong just had his number, I don't know on the night. However, if we can just go like round by round, in round 1, Song Yadong lands not a lot in that first minute. Ricky Simón, and look, this is normal. 5-round fight, your first minute, everything's a bit tentative. It's a bit tense. You're getting to grips with everyone. You're feeling size, you're feeling weight, you're looking, you're measuring, you're checking stances, cadences, switches, feints, all of these sorts of things. But Ricky
and
Simón,
I think just maybe to just piggyback on that as well, I think with Song having kind of faded a little bit in the Corey Sandhagen fight, that may have been in the back of his mind as well, where we didn't see him come out of the traps. But that's down to a level of experience as well and good fight IQ. And it's picking up lessons and picking up, things that you need to do differently too. I think that's very important in the development of any fighter, is leaving your ego at the door, looking at those mistakes and actively working. And I think with Song Yadong, he would have been a little bit trigger happy, where he relied on his explosive power a little bit too much. And I found him undone against Corey Sandhagen. And look, we seen it in this fight as well, Harry. Look, we can go through the rounds now. You mentioned a slow start in round 1, but we did see that explosiveness, but only in spurts here. And that was a kind of a growth in what we've seen in the development of Song Yadong as a fighter.
Exactly. What Song Yadong has done so well, and the sort of ability to keep a gas tank going over these 4 and a bit rounds, was largely down to an adjustment he has made in his approach to fights. He realizes that he has mad power in his hands, and he realizes that he has insane explosivity, and he's clearly a very strong athlete, physical specimen. Well, Ricky Simón is the same, right? Clearly a very physical athlete, clearly a very strong human. The difference to me was the power. And Song Yadong has realized that if he walks fighters down, similar to Jimmy Wallhead, Rhys McKee, just it didn't go the right way, similar to if he allows fighters to believe that he is walking onto a shot. We saw so many times that he would slip his head to the outside, slip a jab, slip a right hand, and land cleanly. The combination that he gained the most success with starts in round 1 and eventually finishes Ricky Simón in round 5, is he feints the right hand and comes with a left hook. Every time Ricky Simón would bite on it. Now, Song Yadong would throw variations. Sometimes he went, please go.
I think that was a very smart game plan too, because we talked about the team alpha male background and Uriah Faber, who knocked out Ricky Simón with an overhand right. So I bet that Ricky Simón was coming in here and he was thinking they're trying to try and catch me with the overhand right again. And this is what you talk about when we were talking about the nitty gritty and fight details and team and planning and kind of game planning into the fights. They had an answer. They knew that Ricky Simón was going to be expecting that overhand right. So it was the fake. And he did throw it at times too, but I don't think he was throwing it as a kill shot. He was just throwing it as a deterrent to try and land that left hook as well. And that was something that really impressed me.
Absolutely. And so we're building, deterrent is a great word. We're building layers of deterrent here that don't sap away at the gas tank. So we've got good footwork. We've got sort of a nuclear arms deal in the right hand, and we've got another nuclear arms deal in the left hand. And he's willing, and this is the thing that most impressed me. The most thing that impressed me is he throws now, or is throwing, at 75% for the most part. Sometimes in the fight, he got carried away a little bit, threw a little bit too overzealous, caught himself throwing wild shots at times. Fine. That's something that we can again go back and try to dial down. But equally, you don't want to get rid of that wildness completely, because there will be moments in fights when you need to drag that wildness out. However, the one criticism I will have of Song Yadong is that Ricky Simón got into a nice flow throughout some of those rounds where he would see that Song is coming forward, and he knew that there was either going to be a one big shot or basically a nothing shot, like a 25% jab or 100% screamer. And so Ricky got into a pattern of being able to land some 1-2s, to be able to land some nice jabs, to be able to land some stiff right hands, and then slip out of the way of other shots. I would like to see, as an improvement, if we're going to see him progress again to the next level, is if we're throwing in combinations for Song Yadong, let's throw a 1 at 75%, a 2 at 100%, a 3 at 75%, and a 4 at 75%. And next time, let's do 1 at 75, 2 at 75, 3 at 100%, and 4 at 75. Let's mix up where the power shot is coming, because again, we're adding layers of deterrent. If Ricky Simón, by the end of round 4, is literally cowering away from a right hand that isn't actually coming, that should be built across the board in all of the combinations. Let's throw in an ability that allow us to still be at what I call a spots fighter, where he just throws massive shots in certain spots and can use that explosivity in that gas tank in short spots, in short spurts. But let's now build a resilience, a deterrence layer, as you so beautifully architected. Let's build a deterrence layers into the game. So when it comes to a Corey Sandhagen again, Corey Sandhagen's like, oh, he's just going to throw one massive shot. I'm just going to keep fucking hitting him. Because if I keep fucking hitting him, he's never going to have a chance to throw that one big shot because I'm fucking hitting him. And what we saw at some point for Ricky Simón, I think it's like the end of round 2, moving into round 3, Ricky Simón just becomes a defensive fighter. He knows he's getting hit. He knows he's getting hit a lot. And he's just becoming a defensive fighter. And if you're just a defensive fighter, Song Yadong can now switch from gear 2 to gear 4 if he wants. And that's what we see.
It was beautiful. I mean, it's what you want to see after the loss that he suffered against Corey Sandhagen. It's like, you know, sometimes we will see where we will see fighters go in there and not take any lessons and stay doing the same things that they've been doing. And it's not what you should be doing. You should be learning from your mistakes. And I think we did see it. Look at the level of competition in Ricky Simón. He provided a good test, and it was the right test for Song Yadong at this stage in his career. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about what's next, because we've got a very, very young man at 25 years of age that we don't really need to be going up there and throwing him to the wolves again straight away. I don't think I want to see that. I think we've got plenty of time here to let him grow and let him develop. There's 2 ways we could do this, and I know you're the fella who had the name, so I have a name here. I'd love to see him against the Pedro Munoz next. let's look at Pedro Muniz is probably below him in the rankings. I think what do we need to rush Song Yadong for here? I think we put him in there against an experienced vet, see if he has the answers to those questions. Do we put him in another 5-round fight again? Do we put him back to 3 rounds? I don't know. Maybe that's the decision the UFC have to make. It's either that or Marlon Vera next. That's I look up the rankings. That's a good test for Song Yadong. I don't want to see him in there against the top 5 yet. Maybe you could look at a Rob Font, maybe, but I think we probably keep him at this kind of a level of fight. Let's keep him fighting guys ranked maybe 10 or 8, in between 8 and down to 15. Keep him fighting at that same level. Let him develop even more, because I think he needs that time to go. Would I be looking at that fight, Harry? Maybe let's have a conversation about this. Would you look at that Ricky Simón fight and think that he is ready again for elite level competition next?
No. I mean,
nor would I.
Probably you could put him in there, but like you said, why rush, right? Why rush? I think there is at the top of that division. I'm just going to run through what we've got in topology here. We've got Aljamain Sterling, we've got Henry Cejudo, we've got Merab Dvalishvili, we've got Sugar Sean O'Malley, we've got Corey Sandin, we've got Piotr Jan. That's 7 absolute murderers, absolute murderers. And like you said, at 25, why rush? I'm not in the business of rushing fighters, as you know. And there's just another echelon there where you have your Chito Veras and you have your Rob Fonts and you have your Ricky Simons. We could add an Umar Nurmagomedov into that upper echelon, but again,
yes. But look, that you could put him in there with an Umar right now as well. Look at it, and you're kind of getting into territory where you have kind of prospects beating prospects. But what? Right. But why not? You're still for me, I would not kind of completely say that he's going to go up there and lose against elite level competition. I think if he performs in a certain manner, he has the ability to beat some of the top guys there in the top 5 or 6. But you're putting yourself at a higher risk. You're going to put yourself in line for probably more damage as well. And, at 25, he's got a lot of experience, a lot of fights under his belt. And I think more so than anything else, what a fighter like Song Yadong should be is leveling up to the next level that he needs to get to. He's still a work in progress. He's still got a ceiling. He still can improve. That in-cage experience will do him good. Different kind of tests. Looking at, I know down the line, I would love to see him against a Merab Dvalishvili, that kind of grinding, grappling performer that goes in there and fights ugly. And how can he do it like that? Because you were right in what you said with Ricky Simón at a stage kind of turtled up a little bit and realized that there was a little bit of a skills gap where he did fight a little bit on the back foot. And I think that's why the finish didn't come until the 5th round, because it's very, very hard to go out there and find the shot when you are fighting a super defensive opponent. The majority of the time, and what you're going to do when you get a finish is you're going to either lure somebody out to counter a shot. That's how you get a knockout. But when a guy isn't committing on his shots, when he's not looking for takedowns, when he's just kind of in there looking, for lack of a better term, looking to survive, it's very difficult to get the finish. But Song Yadong got the finish there, and it was a very good performance. I think he ticked off a lot of boxes. Finish us off on this fight before we move on, Harry.
I'll offer you 3 names.
When I say 2, you come back with 3. Give them to me. Give them to me. Are we going to go in 3, 2, 1? And your third, let's go your third favorite, your second favorite, and then your first favorite. Let's build this in anticipation.
Okay, so I'll preface this slightly differently. I think the 3 options are: if you want to rush him, here's a name. If you want to give him a guy to just build off, here's a name. Or if you want to give him a test around where he is, here's a name. So my favorite is the test around where he is right now. Let's do the Umar Nurmagomedov fight, right? I love that just because it's a brilliant fight. You can do that exactly as we have here. Another fight night main event. Umar Nurmagomedov needs that test. He needs that. Here you go, top of the bill. Let's see what happens. Over 5 rounds. Let's see that. Let's do that. Here's a guy that's just done the 5 rounds. You're in similar situations in your career. Let's go see who's the best right now. As you say, whichever one loses, doesn't really matter. They can build back, no problem. If you want to do a Here's a
as
guy
as you casually crack your neck there as well.
Sorry about that. Oh, that doesn't go on the microphone.
That's all good.
The guy that you feed him to is Dominic Cruz.
I saw Dom's name and I just feel bad even mentioning that Song Yadong should fight him, because Song Yadong would do bad things to Dominic Cruz at this stage of his career, and I just don't want to see that. Like, that could be the fight that they make.
I think the fight they actually make, and this is the fight where they rush him, is Piotr Yan.
Yeah.
Hear me out.
I don't disagree. I like that fight.
He needs a win. You're not going to see Piotr Yan do massive grappling things. You're going to see him do more striking things than grappling things. Can take a shot, can land a shot, has sort of seemingly begun to transition into this guy that was the apex of the division. He's still sort of question marks. Is he the best fighter in this division or is he not? Is he starting to dwindle? Is he moving into this guy in the really upper echelon that's bringing the other guys into the upper echelon? Is that his role now? If he is, you give Song Yadong Piotr Yan.
And I like that fight. My problem with that fight, look, it's the former champ test, and it's one that happens time and time again. My problem with that is that if Song Yadong goes there and does beat Piotr Yan, well, we're back to the Corey Sandhagens, we're back to the Aljamain Sterlings and the Sean O'Malley's, and we're back at elite level competition again.
I'm with you.
I would kind of prefer to see that maybe a year down the line from here. Let's get him 2 more fights. I think out of all the fights that we've talked about here, I originally said Pedro Munoz. It's kind of the veteran test. I want to see him a prospect versus prospect. Umar Nurmagomedov for me is the fight. I hope it happens. An undefeated guy. I mean, you're talking about, okay, people will talk about Song Yadong fighting down in the division. At this stage of his career, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. All right, he's worked hard to get where his ranking is at. One thing that does shine out from that Umar Nurmagomedov fight is 16-0 prospect. You have a chance to defeat somebody for the very first time. So it'll be interesting to see what to do next. I'm excited to see what's the next move for Song Yadong. And we'll move on to the co-main event. Michał Borralho went out there and defeated Michał Oleksiejczuk by rear naked choke. Look, we said you were not that convinced with Borralho going into this co-main event. We were critical of him for being in this spot a couple of times, but not really doing anything with it. We're at this kind of groundhog day with live opponents, types of finishes. Yeah, he went out there and won unanimous decisions. And I feel I will give him credit here, while without getting too excited, that he went and he pushed for the finish and he got the finish here. Did he do anything to convince you any other ways than what you were thinking in the preview show? And if anybody didn't see the preview show, you just weren't that convinced that Borralho was the guy to make waves in the middleweight division.
I think less of him now, I think.
Go ahead.
The striking is absolutely horrendous. Literally what he has, and I'll give him this, he has really, really solid power, and he's not afraid to use it either. And that shows me some interesting wrinkles. Some of the leg kicks, some of the shots inside, some of the work inside the clinch. Some of the clinch work was fantastic, actually. His ability to move between clearly where he's comfortable, which is the grappling situations, and then bolt on some striking. There was a gorgeous body shot from a tie clinch. There was a really nice elbow on a break, and there was a really nice knee on a break too. Those things I'll sing his praises for. Great stuff. Really, really nice striking off grappling. Straight striking, he was horrendous. So erratic on the feet, just throwing shots to throw them. Massive power, doesn't move his head in any way, shape, or form. Loads up on everything. And look, Michał Oleksiejczuk was there to just ask some questions on the feet, and I think he answered a load of questions in that if we push Caio Borralho into a upper echelon of that middleweight division anytime soon, he gets absolutely decimated. Like, when it got to the ground, Michał Oleksiejczuk, there's nothing for him. Absolutely nothing. He effectively gave Caio Borralho the mount. He then gave him his back. And the entire time Caio Borralho had his back, Oleksiejczuk's chin was up in the air. He knew that when his back was taken that we were done here. Caio Borralho was even shocked that the short choke got the job done. And then he, pushes him off, does whatever. But the thing that I really fear here is that if you go and you give Caio Borralho, let's just say Bruno Silva, that doesn't go well for Caio Borralho, right?
Yeah.
If you go and you give Caio Borralho Rodolfo Vieira, we might have some fun, right? But we have to keep him around this sort of level to allow that striking to come on a little bit, because the power is there. The willingness to throw is there. He can take a shot, fine. But if you go and do, let's say, a Paulo Costa or a Marvin Vettori or a Jack Hermansson or a Chris Curtis or a Kelvin Gastelum, boy, oh boy, he's got some serious, serious problems. And like, this is kind of my issue, right? This is 3 or 4 co-main events in a row. You're telling me that this guy is something special, that this guy is something important. This guy is something I must sit up and really take note of. And right now, his skills aren't at that level. Can they be? Sure, of course. Like, any fighter can improve. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. My issue is, don't put a fighter in this position where, like we're talking about with Song Yadong, the trajectory of a co-main event fighter 3 or 4 times in a row has to be skyrocketing. Because you're telling me that this guy is really important. So who do you put him with? Who's next? Is it Brad Tavares? Is it Bruno Silva? Is it higher than that? Because those are tough fights for him.
Yeah, I think that it's got to be one of those level of opponents, I think, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out at that stage then. And I agree with everything that you said. I think that UFC are kind of forcing his hand by putting him in those slots. They're putting a lot of effort in trying to build him. They put him in there against an opponent that they were probably confident that this result was going to happen. But it's like, it's either die a dog or shit the license now at this stage when it comes to Borralho. He's going to be facing probably a ranked opponent next. And yeah, I'm not too convinced as well how well he can do in that fight, but it'll be interesting to see. Look, you mentioned Rodolfo Vieira. He went out there and he got the arm triangle choke over Cody Brundage. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember, but I'm almost certain that we said on the preview show that what Cody Brundage should do is just go out there and go guns a-blazing from the get-go and see what happens. And I think that's what he did. Unfortunately for him, it didn't work out too well for him in the end, did it?
So I think we actually said Rodolfo Vieira should go out there, try and double leg.
Should go out and do that. I knew we said on one of the guys.
Brundage listen was like, fuck that, lads, I'm going to do it. Like, this might be it may be worse than Francisco Trinaldo level fight IQ here. Like, I honestly wanted to gouge my own fucking eyes out. The reason why I put this fight for us to talk about was literally so I could shit all over the fight IQ here. Like, look,
go for it.
We know that Rodolfo Vieira's striking is never going to be anywhere near his skill level in the grappling. He's just, the age and the skill disparity is just insane, right? His striking for MMA full stop, his striking for the UFC full stop is just not good enough. It is absolutely not good enough. He gets clipped far too easily. He gets hurt far, far too easily. Now he's a tough man. He knows his spots in the grappling where he can take some shots, where he's safe and where he's not safe. There are moments in that first round that he pulls underhook half guard. Like, that just doesn't happen in MMA ever. And yet, because of the skill disparity in somebody who is as deeply rich in his awareness of the grappling as Rodolfo Vieira is, he can make it work, right? He's pulling deep half. We don't see that in MMA ever, right? But because these situations are occurring, Cody Brundage has to respect the grappling of Rodolfo Vieira, because if at any moment he doesn't, bad things happen. And yet, Cody Brundage has Rodolfo Vieira on the thinnest of ice skates in that first round. In the second round says, I know let me try and guillotine him.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say it. It's, oh my God. Like, an absolutely, like, I don't understand sometimes, like, and look, it's so fucking hard when you're in there and everything is happening, but like, you need at least have the base level of knowledge for if you're Cody Brundage of who you're fighting, and he does have that, but yeah, he still chooses to pull guard and go for a guillotine against the multi-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion, and the rest is history after that. Rodolfo Vieira must have been like, is this Christmas? Is this Christmas that's happening right now? Because he mustn't have believed his luck when he felt him dropping down, because it was the beginning of the end of the fight after that, wasn't it?
The worst part of this fight, right, isn't even that he jumped a gilly. Because, like, okay, look, you've just battered this fella for 5 minutes. We all know that when you take that level of damage, your awareness is lacking dramatically. And if Cody Brundage can go out and submit Rodolfo Vieira, he can forever say, I submitted Rodolfo Vieira, fine. If you want to go out and be a fucking idiot and jump a gilly on Rodolfo Vieira, fine. It's not like there aren't ways out of that guillotine if you really wanted them, right? The worst decision I have seen in a long time in mixed martial arts is when Rodolfo Vieira is looking to pass the half guard, right? He's got a crossface, which is the first upper body control that he needs. The second thing that he really needs is an underhook to get as solid a pass as he wants. When he completes the pass, when he completes passing his legs away from the hips of what's this fucking idiot's name? Brundage. When Cody Brundage, thank you. When if and when he would have finished the pass, he needs the upper body grits to dominate the secondary position, which would have probably been side control or mount or whatever he chose. Rodolfo Vieira has closed his left knee to the right hip of Cody Brundage, and he's starting to work the right knee out of the half guard of Cody Brundage. And at the same time, he's similarly looking for that underhook. He's driving his head into the forehead into the, he's driving his forehead into the mat space that's free. It's called crashing the shoulder. And it makes Cody Brundage finding an underhook really, really difficult. Now, Rodolfo Vieira begins hand fighting to get this underhook that he wants. And Cody Brundage says, let me make a smart decision and try to guillotine him again from smashed out half guard. And he drives his left hand up and out of Rodolfo Vieira's way and not only just gives him the underhook, but puts himself in an arm triangle. And my fucking God, I could have smashed my screen when I saw it. Because, again, you've jumped a guillotine, fine. No problem. You tried to finish him, fine. There was certainly a moment in that guillotine where Rodolfo Vieira was bracing. There was certainly a moment when that guillotine was on. But again, you make a bad decision, fine. To give this fella an arm triangle when all you had to do was stop the underhook being taken was absolutely egregiously poor decision making. Because like you said, just think of who you're fucking fighting. Giving 100%. An arm triangle to anyone is a bad choice. Giving an arm triangle to a behemoth of a 185 multiple-time black belt world champion is the dumbest thing I have ever fucking seen in high-level MMA.
And it's like, it's even, yeah. It's definitely more confusing considering that he was finding so much success on the feet. And look, that's we've said our piece. Like we've said our piece. That I knew that I was looking forward. I was a little surprised, but I was looking forward to talking about this fight with you because anytime I see anybody jumping for a guillotine now, it's you're the first person I think of because I know you're absolutely crying and going insane inside. Because, yeah, those are the results, guys. You're dropping for guillotines against multi-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champions. You're going to get tapped out. And that's what happened. Moving on, Fernando Padilla went and made his UFC debut against Julian Erosa. Okay, let's talk about the fight itself for as long as it went. We'll talk about the finish after. Talking about a kid here coming in, making his UFC debut against a really good opponent in Julian Erosa. And we talk about UFC octagon jitters and this and that, not performing to your level. But Padilla went out there, man, and he started landing these shots early, and he started connecting with good power, and he had Julian Erosa really, really badly hurt on multiple occasions. So let's talk about the performance first. Let's talk about the finish second. What was your thoughts on the fight itself? The way Padilla went out there and kind of imposed his will from the get-go. I was really impressed with him. Look, we have to see a lot more from him, but I think when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at a guy who's coming in for his UFC debut against a really tough guy, and he looked to be, until the fight stopped, and we were robbed maybe of true clarity, maybe a little bit. I'll give my thoughts on the finish. I'll give my thoughts on the finish in a minute. I agreed with the finish, to be honest. I agreed with the ref stepping in at that stage. But just your thoughts on Padilla and his performance and the accuracy of his strikes as well. Like, almost everything seemed to be landing.
So I think this was where, to me, I just need to see more. I can't really draw any conclusions right now, because for the first sort of 30 seconds, he looked nervous, a bit off balance when he was throwing his shots, very steppy, wasn't defensively sound at all, and then just seemed to turn a switch, and then everything landed. And it was like, that is as highlight reel, as beautiful a highlight reel finish as, to me, when Donald Cerrone knocked out Logan Storley. Because the shots that were landing, Padilla knew where Julian Erosa's head was going to be, because the shots were coming by the time the other one had landed. And you don't make the decisions that quickly unless you're seeing things in 7D. And that finishing sequence gives me a lot of excitement for Padilla, because, okay, I thought defensively he didn't look great. Offensively, in that first 30 seconds, it was a bit jittery and it was a bit whatever. Is that UFC nerves? I don't know. Is that he still quite hasn't found the range that he's fighting at, being able to fight at as wide and as long as he actually is? He's a huge, tall man for the division. But then he goes out and he lands that first jab. And the sequence that follows, I'll just quickly run through because I wrote down the shots. Stiff jab. He circles to the left, left hook. Immediate right hand, immediate low left hook as Julian Erosa dips his head. Another left hook, another right hand, left jab, running at him. He's now not standing still or just shifting centimeters. He's running across the cage as he lands the left hand, a right hand, and then he's falling. Julian Erosa is falling by the time the next left and right comes. He bounces up. We see another couple of shots, and I have zero problem with the stoppage. Please tell me what you think.
No. Definitely no. Like, people calling this, like, my opinion on these type of stoppages, for people who are complaining about the stoppages, what do you really want to see here? I think that at that stage we had seen enough, and I think that anyone who's educated and watching that fight, and gladly each and every referee that gets in there is able to make that judgment call, is that we do not want to see Julian Erosa absolutely sparked out unconscious, because the guy was just too tough for his own good there. And I don't think he was recovered. He had gone down twice before he got back up again. And I guarantee you that fight went another couple of seconds. He was either going to get dropped and stopped again, or he was going to get hit clean and sparked out unconscious. And that's what I don't want to see, really. I think, I had seen enough at that stage. And I agree with the stoppage 100% too. No, I think I even tweeted it out on the night. No problems with that stoppage whatsoever. So, that, like, I think we need to calm down a little bit when we're talking about, the referee shouldn't have stopped in there. The guy had been dropped twice and it was on the, like, I mean, if you know what you're looking at there, he was on the way down again. He was going to get caught flushly again. Padilla was he just found that flow. And I think he explained the finishing sequence absolutely perfectly. Beautiful to watch. Beautiful. I go on to speculate on the start of his performance, because I love to speculate. I think it was a little bit of UFC jitters, because, I mean, and why wouldn't you have either? I think the way you described it was perfect. He hit the switch, because I think maybe for the first 30 seconds and that, he's like, oh shit, I'm in the UFC. I'm in the octagon. I'm fighting Julian Erosa. Like, we're talking about a guy who has a ton of UFC experience as well, and a ton more experience outside the UFC in Julian Erosa. Like, Erosa is 6 and 7 now in UFC. So we're talking about a UFC debutant taking on at the time, a 12-fight UFC veteran and fighting in his 13th fight. So it can be a little bit understanding why you might be a bit jittery. But then I can guarantee he probably had a conversation in his head and just said, all right, let's turn it on here. And when he did, we saw the finish and it was lovely. When we're talking about the ugliness of the last fight, this is a beautiful finish, and this is why we're tuning in. It was a great performance, and I'm excited to see there'll be no excuses for any of that jitteriness in these next fight. I think he'll have that experience behind him, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he moves forward. You have one more thing to talk about before we move on, Harry?
I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on the stop. I just wanted to piggyback on the stoppage just a little bit, and that was that one thing that Mark Goddard speaks on and speaks very well on is just understanding what's happening in the fight. And I understand that from a fan's perspective, there is a very natural conclusion that you see when one fighter goes unconscious or goes limp or goes stiff, right? That is a very natural reaction. And you understand, everyone universally understands that means that the fight is over. However, this isn't just fighting. It's supposed to also be a sport. And the rules of the sport is that when you are no longer intelligently defending yourself. Well, Julian Erosa took 9 shots in that combination where he intelligently defended himself for 0 of them. When he eventually got back up from being dropped from the right hand, he eats another right hook that sends him crashing to the canvas. That fight is finished. It's finished because the referee understands that there is nothing left that Julian Erosa can achieve without taking sufficiently more damage. That is the referee's job, is to save the fighters from themselves. It's fine for Julian Erosa to have argument with the stoppage. He got up and immediately protested the stoppage. That's fine. These fighters are programmed to never stop. It is the referee's job when he feels and finds that a fighter has taken enough damage that they deserve to be saved, to save them. And that's exactly what he did. No problem with the stoppage whatsoever. Yeah,
Chris Tognoni was the referee, and you know what? I think he's pretty damn solid referee as well. We've seen him quite a bit now on these Apex cards, and I think he's come in and found his groove as a ref, and I think that was a very, very good stoppage as well. We shall scoot down really, really quickly around the rest of the card. Marcus Rodrigo de Lima won a unanimous decision over Waldo Cortez Acosta. That doesn't even deserve your move on. I just have to say about this fight, it was a travesty of a fight to watch. An absolute travesty. Awful, terrible. And we shall move on. Trey Waters came in, picked up a little bit of an upset win over Josh Quinlan. It was very impressive on his UFC debut. Got unanimous decisioned by Trey Waters. Well done to Trey Waters. Martin Buday took a unanimous decision home against Jake Collier. Not a great fight in the heavyweight division as well. I mean, we're talking about anything below the top 8 in the heavyweight division is tough viewing at the minute. A good fight on the undercard. Cody Durden took home a good unanimous decision win over Charles Johnson. That's a good win. We talked about this fight on the preview show. Little bit tight for time now, so we're not going to talk about it. Arina Alexieva got a submission by a knee bar from Stephanie Egger. Missed weight coming in here, kind of tarnishes that win a little bit. Marcus McGee came in on very, very short notice and picked up a very good win to move to 7-1 against Journey Newsom. He was the kind of talk of the undercard, Harry, coming in at such short notice and putting on a pretty good display as well. How did you see that performance and the finish itself?
Just a really interesting style. Very, very interesting style. Athletic, fights really long, fights really wide in his stance, bounces in, really aggressive, loads of kicks, happy to take a shot. Just a really interesting, bouncy, flowy, but mixed with that athleticism. You don't often see the two mixed together. Like you think about Wonder Boy, there's a certain type of athleticism. There's a lot of dexterity. There's a lot of variety in his style. And then you have somebody like McKee who seems to have that explosivity to him, the sort of raw natural athlete that we think of. And I mean, the shot that drops Newsom's clean as you like, and to wrap up the finish as quickly as he did is fantastic stuff. And I'm very excited to see what happens now for McKee, because in the sort of the second half of the first round, he seemed to slow a little. There seemed to be a little more labor to his shots. The sort of variety and the explosivity led him more towards inaccuracy than it had in the first 2.5. Then obviously he went back, had a rest, came out and did the same things, and we saw what happened at the start of the second. But I wonder whether, again, how much of that is down to jitters? How much of that is a bit of an adrenaline dump halfway through the first round where he's like, oh, fucking hell, I'm actually here doing the thing, right? I wonder. And so I'm interested.
I think, I'd like to speculate again and say a little mix. I'm going to speculate the shit out of a lot of things here on this Balance Breakdown podcast, folks. You better get used to it. I think it probably was a mixture of what both of those things you said, but we also have to remember taking a fight on a couple of days' notice too. A lot happening in a couple of days, getting down. I don't know how far he was away. Probably his natural weight class is 135. Fought this at 140. Maybe had to kind of rush into cutting some weight as well. And I think, look, given all the circumstances, to go out there and do, like, one of the most favorite finishes I have is when somebody hurts somebody and then goes down and submits them, because it's just like two stamps of authority on your opponent. Yeah, I have enough to hurt you on the feet, and then I'm going to follow you down and I'm going to submit you. It's just, I don't know, I just quite enjoy watching a finish like that. And look at, Marcus McKee deserved all the plaudits after the fight, took a chance, took a gamble, went in there, produced the performance. I think got himself a bonus as well. And I'm looking forward to the next one too. And I think that's kind of, before I rudely interrupted you there, I think that's kind of the road that you were going down as well, is it?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's see him again. Absolutely. Yeah. Sign me up.
Let's go, champ. Jamie Lynn Hart moved to 6-0 with a unanimous decision win over Hayley Cowan. That kicked the card off. That started the card for the UFC, and that ends the Balance Breakdown this week. And it was great fun. It was great to chat about a little bit of Cage Warriors and sprinkle in a little bit of UFC. We covered all angles this week on the breakdown. And we'll be back again next Thursday to talk about, or next Tuesday. I'm getting mixed up now with the preview show. The preview show is coming this Thursday. We'll talk about the UFC 288 card coming up. A brilliant card. And we'll be back next Tuesday to break down that card again as well. And anything else maybe that's gone interesting. Follow that man on Twitter and on social media at BJJ_Harry Powell. I'm at Ian O'Neill MMA on all social media too. The Severe Spotlight shone on Rhys McKee. You can check that shit out on SevereMMA.com. An excellent piece that goes into the nitty gritty of the performance of Rhys McKee. He only scratched the surface, lads, at the start of this podcast. You got to go over there and read the article to get a full capsulation of what Rhys McKee's performance there on Saturday night. Any final thoughts to see us out, Harry?
288 is an absolute screamer of a card. I'm very excited to see what Cage Warriors do over the next 6 to 8 months. I'm hoping that the July card that they bring to London will be a good one. Hopefully I can get there in person again and cover it again for SevereMMA. But I think the thing that resonates to me as I watch Cage Warriors, as I watch the UFC, is that the future is bright for European MMA.
Absolutely. It sure is. And hopefully we get to see a lot more people transfer from Cage Warriors over to the UFC, over to the big leagues throughout the next couple of years. We may have seen the start of a lot of people's journey on Saturday night. And you know what? We may start talking to him here, about him here on the Balance Breakdown podcast and their first fight in Cage Warriors. And hopefully that flourishes into us talking about him on the UFC preview show, which will be coming into your faces on Thursday. UFC 288, a big card. And we can't wait to break it down for you. Thanks as always. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, follow that man over there. Check out the Severe Spotlight. Check out the SevereMMA Patreon with all other great content over there, including Speaker's Corner, including the Chasing Pack. And check out the Owl Triangle as well. All available. All the reaction is available on the YouTube channel. All the post-fight interviews. Head on over there. Check it out. We'll see you the next time. Thank you all for listening. Goodbye. Good luck. And dog bless.